Amateur Traveler is in its 20th year now, but can you imagine if I had people on the show who had never been to the destination, but had just read about it or seen a movie about it? That wouldn't make any sense at all, and you wouldn't listen. We all know how important it is to receive advice from people who know a destination to get the most authentic local experience. And a great option for experiencing this is Explore Worldwide and their authentic small group adventures, led by local tour leaders, perfect for solo travelers who want to meet like minded people with a desire for adventure. I'm often an independent traveler, but two of my last three trips were with small group tours because they organize everything and it's a lot easier. If you want to recreate the tour I did to Malta, they have a Malta and Gozo Discovery Tour. I'm intrigued by one of their tours called A Taste of Sicily. The company again is Explore Worldwide, and visit exploreworldwide.com to learn more. And thanks to Explore Worldwide for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler.
I got my bags packed, I'm on a roll. I'm heading out there and I'm ready to go. I'm looking real good in my passport photo.
Amateur Traveler, episode 690. Today, the Amateur Traveler talks about temples, a tower, and street food, a painted village, a cat village, and salt fields as we go to Tainan, Taiwan. Welcome to the Amateur Traveler. I'm your host, Chris Christensen. Let's talk about Taiwan. I'd like to welcome to the show Katy Liang, who has come to us from Vancouver, British Columbia, but come to talk to us about Tainan in the country of Taiwan. Katy is from Photospired.com. She is a blogger there, and we'll put a link to that in the show notes. And now, Katy, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So what's your connection first with Taiwan?
So I was actually born and raised in Taipei, Taiwan, which is the capital city of Taiwan. I moved to Canada when I was 11 years old, and I've been back and forth in between the two. I actually lived in Taiwan for 4 years after graduating from university, and I just recently moved back to Vancouver, Canada. But I will go back to Taiwan again in the next few months or so.
You have two homes, is really what you're telling us.
Yeah, essentially. I like to go Canada's sort of home because my family's here and my cats is here. I think spiritually, I really, really miss Taiwan, and I think that's where I really feel at home.
Excellent. Well, and why should someone go to this part of Taiwan? We've talked about Taiwan on the show 3 times before, I think, but this is an area we haven't dealt with. Why should we go to Tainan?
So I want to talk about Tainan specifically because I really enjoy going there. So it can be the short weekend trip for me, but I've been there numerous times, and each time there was so much to discover. And I think the essence is really about the warmth of the people there and the history and culture you can find there.
And we're in the southern part of the island on the western coast of Taiwan, so the opposite end of the island pretty much from Taipei.
Yeah, I guess you could say that. It's about 4 hours drive from Taipei, but if you take the high-speed rail, it's only 2.5 hours.
Okay. And what should we do in Tainan? What itinerary are you going to recommend for us?
Tainan is really about the street food. So the first thing you're going to try is definitely to find some Taiwanese breakfast. So Taiwanese breakfast is essentially things like soy milk. So if you find a place where they make fresh soy milk, you can really taste the roast. You can also find things like Chinese donuts and Taiwanese-style omelet. So those are really excellent.
I know what a donut is. I don't know what a Chinese-style omelet is.
You got a little pastry and then the egg on top. And you can flavor it with soy sauce. And I think they usually add some corn or pork floss. It really depends on what kind of flavor you want.
Okay.
I guess it's a really good start to the day because you have so many different things.
Is there a particular region of the city, street, or vendor you would send us to for street food? Street food obviously changes sometime.
Yeah, so actually you can find Taiwanese breakfast everywhere throughout the island.
Mm-hmm.
For Tainan especially, they have very unique take on breakfast. So they like to eat things that are really heavy for breakfast. So you might find things like taro cake for breakfast or shrimp meatballs for breakfast.
Okay.
So those things are a bit more heavy, but they are really very flavorful and they really give you the energy for the rest of the day.
Well, and let me pin you down a little bit here. So I arrived, let's say, by train, high-speed rail. I get out of the train station. Should I hit the very first vendor I find, or is there a particular direction I should head to find the best street food?
So if you get off the high-speed rail, you won't be in Tainan city center. So
Okay.
it's actually quite a drive from city center. So you can take the shuttle or hop on the regional train and get there in maybe 10 minutes or so.
Okay.
And once in city center, you can find much more options.
Okay. Yeah, so once I'm in city center, they're all over the place.
I would start my search from the Tainan train station. So there's just lots of streets and lots of street vendors there. And I'm sure any one of them will be really good.
Okay. Where to next?
Okay, so after breakfast, you'll probably want to explore a bit more. So I recommend the street called Shennong Street. What's unique about this street is that it was once one of the busiest streets in Tainan because of trade. So Tainan used to be really famous with canals and waterways. That was how people got around in the old days. Over time, that became less popular and the street fell under repair. Now the government has really revived it and now it's become a cultural hub. So you can find bistros, cafes, crafts, and lots of things to do there. So that's a good place to check out.
And the name of the street one more time?
Shennong Street. So it's spelled Shenong. But one thing you have to be careful of is that because they have a lot of different crafts and handmade stuff there, so most of the vendors don't want you to take photos.
Okay.
Yeah, you can take photos of the streets, but not of the products they're selling.
And what kind of products am I going to see at Shenong Street?
Very unique souvenirs I can take home because I find that if you go to a souvenir store, generally you find the same stuff all throughout the island. On Shenong Street, you can find little pouches you can use for coins, and there's also traditional clothing.
Got it. And this is, when you say street, this is more like an alley.
Yeah, exactly. So if you look on Google Maps, it's actually really short.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, so it's an easy walk for you, probably.
Okay. Where to?
I think it's a good time to cool down because Tainan is generally very warm all throughout the year. So you might want to go and have some shaved ice. And so one place I recommend is called Yucheng. It's spelled Youcheng.
Okay.
So they're very famous for the mango shaved ice. And that's usually during the summer month. That's when the mangoes are in season and the most sweet. And so you have to order the mango shaved ice if you go there during the summer. So it's better to order strawberries in the winter because that's when strawberries are in season then.
Got it. Okay.
After shaved ice, onto more food because China is really about
This is going to be a theme here, isn't it?
Just food brings a lot of memories of a place. And I really like to discover food or cities through food.
Okay.
I find that Tainan so fascinating because of that. After that, I would recommend for lunch, you can go to Du Xiaoyue for the danzai noodle.
Okay.
Danzai noodle is also unique to Tainan. It's actually become so famous that it's the number one search word for Tainan.
Okay. Okay.
And so there's a story behind it. So it used to be that fishermen in Tainan, they would have a few months of rough season where they were unable to go out to sea. And so this guy he wanted to survive over the few rough months. So he started selling the noodles at the temple square. And because of that, he was carrying the noodles over like a shoulder pole. And he named it danzai noodle for that.
Sorry, my Chinese is not as good as yours. The meaning of the word is what?
So danzai is Taiwanese for the shoulder poles.
Ah, okay. Got it.
You'll find actually several locations for danzai noodle in Tainan, and all of them claim to be the original. And I'm not quite sure which one is actually the original, but the one I went is actually the most humble looking, I should say. And it's right across from Chikan Tower, which is the most famous landmark in Tainan. So you should be able to find them quite easily, and it's very good snack food for lunch or for any time of the day, actually.
Okay. And you say the tower, Chikan Tower, Chihkan?
Correct, yeah. So that brings on to the next itinerary point of interest to check out that tower because it is the most famous landmark in Tainan. And there are lots of stories and legends behind the place. You'll find that there's 9 turtle-looking statues placed throughout the compound.
Okay.
Yeah, they symbolize strength because they carry the tower, which is interesting. There's also this myth that there was like a tunnel that connects this tower to another nearby fort, which I'll talk about later. They were used by the Dutch in earlier days. The 2 towers are connected.
Well, and you say the Dutch. So the Dutch, they had a colony here in Tainan, our trading city.
Yes, it was one of the earliest establishments in Taiwan. And so the Dutch came around the 1600s, and they built a fort called, well, we call it today Anping Fort.
Okay.
And then later they also built Chikan Tower and a bunch of other landmarks in Tainan. And so a lot of the architecture here is really inspired by that area of time.
Okay. Not that this tower looks Dutch.
So yeah, Chikan Tower actually does not look Dutch or colonial at all because it's been through several changes. And so now it looks more Chinese.
Okay.
After that, I would recommend checking out the other forts I was talking about, which is Anping Fort.
Mm-hmm.
This is a bit on the outskirts of town. You'll likely get through to the fort by the Old Street. So the Old Street is another interesting place to check out because there are many street vendors for drinks and snacks and dessert. You might find things like tofu pudding desserts. You might find things like the oyster omelets, which is very famous in Taiwan. The fort has so much history. You can find the remains of the original wall on the compound. It's literally a wall left. Right next to it, there's a memorial hall that explains the history behind it. You can see the photos, you can see the artifacts remaining from that time.
Okay. And the other name for this fort, it seems like the original Dutch name was Fort Zeelandia.
Yeah.
If you want to do it in Dutch, okay? Zeelandia. That's okay. I can say the Dutch, you can say the Chinese. How's that as a deal?
Sounds good. The forts is a very interesting place to check out. And then after that, I would recommend doing some tour of the religion in Tainan. So Tainan is famous for its temples. It has the most number of temples in Taiwan.
Oh, okay.
One good one to check out is called Puji Temple. And this is in the center of town. Find it nestled in between small streets.
Okay.
If you go during Chinese New Year, you'll find it really an amazing display of lanterns throughout the temple. So the lanterns are painted and crafted by well-wishers. They just want to make their own lantern and to write down their own wishes. But in other times of the year, you can also find prayer cards tied to trees around the temple. So you can make a wish and have that kind of in the temple as a blessing.
Okay. And when you mention Chinese New Year, I think many people who are listening know that Chinese New Year moves around a bit. It's lunar. I don't remember when it is here in 2020.
Yeah, I have to look that up as well.
It's Saturday, January 25th in 2020. Okay, so we're talking in general in the winter months, January-ish is when we're going to find Chinese New Year. And you mentioned that it's warm all year round. Is there a best time of year to go to Tainan?
Because it's really warm in the summer month, I would recommend going in winter or spring. So actually December typically tends to be dry and relatively mellow in weather.
Okay. And Chinese New Year might be a good time to go. Okay, great.
If you want to see the festivities, and there might be a lot of people, but yeah, that's part of the experience.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Then after that, another place to check out is called, this one is hard to pronounce, it's called Duiyuemen. And it's spelled Duiyuemen.
Okay, Duiyuemen.
Yeah, and so this is actually a very, very small gate. that remains from the old days. So it was built in 1835, and now the only thing you can find is literally that gate. Once you enter the gates, there's tons of shops and unique places to see. A lot of the architecture from the olden days in Tainan, they are inspired by feng shui. So the gate was placed in this location because of feng shui.
Okay. That you have to have the gate face this direction because it would be bad luck for it to face a different direction.
Right. So you want to have it west facing for prosperity.
Got it. Okay. I didn't know the details there.
Yeah. There's a lot of places or buildings you'll find in Tainan that have unique locations, I might say, because of the people's beliefs.
And help me out here a little bit. If it faced west, it would be prosperity. If it faced south, it would be...
I don't know. I'm not sure about south.
I just asked because my house faces south, so I thought I'd pick up some tips here.
Interesting. You might have to ask a feng shui master for that.
I may have to move.
Yeah. The temple I was mentioning earlier, Puji Temple, it also has a story behind its location. So Tainan is known as the city of the phoenix, which is an animal or creature that we think of as for prosperity and luck and very magical kind of creature. So Puji Temple is set in the middle of the city to capture and to keep the phoenix and to keep the luck to the people.
Okay.
And after that, one really famous place to check out is called Sicao, Green Tunnel. And Sicao is spelled as Sicao.
Okay.
And so this place is really known for being the Amazon of Taiwan. I say that because it's lush and it's green and just this waterway that takes you around and kind of see the ecological sites.
So you mentioned that the city used to have a lot of different canals. Is this then one of the original canals?
Yes. This was a man-made canal that was built, I think, during the Qing dynasty. And they used to transport sugar and other goods during the old times.
Mm-hmm.
And so because the water is really shallow, you usually travel on a bamboo raft and travel really slowly. So now you can actually take that same boat ride around the canals. It's about half an hour ride and you have narration, even though the narration is in Mandarin.
Not as helpful for some of us as it might be.
But she'll point to the left and to the right. You can see what creatures come up as she's pointing. You get to wear bamboo hats as well, which is pretty cool.
Got it.
Okay, after the Green Tunnel, another place to check out would be another temple, which is called Lu'emen, Tianhou Temple. So there's a lot to spell here. Lu'emen is spelled Luermen.
Okay.
It has a long history as well. So everything has a story behind it, which is why I find it so fascinating. And with this particular temple, there's actually a debate as to which one is original again, because the original temple was built back in, I believe, the 1600s with the earlier establishment of Tainan. And so there was a flood in the 1800s that destroyed the original temple, and all the statues and religious objects were displaced throughout the city. And so this particular temple actually has, I believe, 2 locations now, and each of them claims to be the original because they hold certain artifacts or certain religious objects.
Ah, okay. So there's the Luermen Matsu Temple, and what's the other one?
Well, I think the one I mentioned is that one. So Tianhou is Matsu in Chinese.
Okay.
If you go, you might be able to see religious ceremonies taking place. So it's actually quite scary because there's a lot of noise going on. They have firecrackers, they have people banging the instruments. So it's a bit overwhelming, but it's really cool to see because there'll be a shaman or someone doing ceremony and they'll be in a trance, dancing around and waving the batons. It's really interesting to see.
Now, we should say we haven't put this into any number of days. This all isn't one day's itinerary so far. So do you know roughly how many days worth of sightseeing we just did here?
I would pace this in 1 or 2 days. You don't want to overwhelm yourself too much with that. So there's tons to do in Tainan as well. So you can easily stay for a week.
But is a lot of this close together because it sounds more than just 2 days worth so far. There's a lot here.
Yeah, so most of the places I mentioned, the food options or the temples, they're all in city center. So you can easily walk to them.
Okay.
Or you can take the bus as well. Another interesting way to get around is through the bike. So we have a bike sharing system in Tainan.
Okay.
It's called a T-bike. So you can find a station on any street corner and you can borrow a bike for half an hour, for a whole day with your credit card.
Okay. And the app for that, is there an English option for the app that we need for that?
I believe so. I was able to find the website in English. So there should be an English version of the app as well.
Yeah, I am seeing the English website. Terrific. And for everybody who's trying to listen to this show and write down notes because you're planning on doing to Tainan, I already did that. And so we'll have links to all these things, as always, in both the lyrics and the show notes of this episode on the amateurtraveler.com website. Terrific.
On to our next destinations. Another place that I kind of discovered upon chance and is really interesting to see is a cat village. And it's right next to the Machu Temple, actually.
Okay.
It makes for a good spot to kind of check out on the way. In Taipei, there's a really, really famous cat village that people go all the time. This is the Tainan version, I guess. So it's like a really rundown looking village. And it dates back to the colonial times from the Japanese occupation.
Okay.
It used to be a dormitory for a factory here in Tainan.
Small coal mine is what I'm reading.
Coal mine? Okay. I think I read something about petrochemical. So it used to be a factory dormitory for the staff, and because the factory closed down, so now it's, I guess, inhabited by more cats than people.
Huh.
Yeah, so you can just find cats sleeping around or lying in the middle of the road, and it's really adorable. And I think that really says a lot about the spirits of Tainan. It's very slow paced. It can enjoy yourself in the sun, just like the cats. They're very lazy and they're really chill.
And this is Hutong Cat Village. It was what I'm seeing the name for it.
Oh, no, sorry. This Hutong is the one I talked about in Taipei.
Oh, sorry. I got it. Okay.
The Tainan one doesn't actually have a name, so you can probably find it just by Googling Tainan Cat Village, but it won't be very obvious where exactly it is.
All right. So by the time you've heard this, we've already found that and put a link to it.
In terms of photo taking, because Tainan has so many interesting sites, I mean, there's really no bad place to check out. But one thing that I really found interesting is that Tainan has a place called a seed museum.
A seed museum?
Yeah.
Okay.
And the name of the seed museum is called Qianqi, which is spelled Qianqi. So it's called Qianqi Seed Museum.
Okay. I don't have any clue what a seed museum would be.
Right. When I first heard about it, I had no idea either. But it's super cool. So it started out as the owner's hobby. So he collects seeds.
Okay.
Southern Taiwan, and he's been doing that for 20 plus years. And it just got so messy that his wife kind of gave him the final ultimatum. Like he either does something with it or she's throwing everything away. So he decided to open a museum and open the doors to public. But you do have to make a reservation. You have to call in advance to book a time because he does a tour.
Huh. Okay. And so he's planted some of the seeds so you can see the different plants, but he's just got hundreds of different types of seeds and plants.
Yeah.
So for somebody who loves gardens, this would probably be a particularly good spot to go to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. It's amazing to see the different kinds of seeds. I have no idea what these seeds look like. I just see the plants normally. You get to experience rubbing the seeds in your hand to try out the different colors because some of them actually have a red hue that's used in makeup or things like that. And it's really fascinating to explore through the building because there are tons of crafts made of seeds or plants as well.
Okay. Interesting. Well, and we should say for some of the research that I am doing to follow along with Katy here, I'm using the Tainan official travel site, which has a good list of different attractions. So I'll put a link to that as well in the show notes.
After that, another place I recommend would be to go to a painter village.
Okay.
Painter villages can be found in many cities in Taiwan. For this one, there's a cute story behind it. There was a grandmother living in this village, and because she is quite elderly and she doesn't get to travel as much as the younger people, so her granddaughters decided to paint the village walls with cute cartoony characters to bring the outside world to the village for their grandmother.
Okay. And so this is the, I'm going to murder this, Hu Qiu Liao painted village? There we go. Every time I speak Chinese people laugh. But
I think it's called Hujia Painter Village, Hujia. So this is a bit further away from city center. You'll probably want to get there by bus, or you can also rent a scooter.
Okay.
This painter village is quite small, but there are so many walls painted because every once in a while, some artists or students from elementary schools will come and paint and add more pieces to the walls. There's fun pops of colors in the village, and you get to see many different interesting cartoony characters. It's a good place to check out and take photos.
So it's a place, if we like street art, this is be a great place to go. And it looks like there are two of them. I am seeing two different ones when I look this up.
Oh, okay.
There's the one whose name I mangled, and then the one you mentioned.
Painter villages are quite popular in Taiwan, so I'm not surprised that there's more now. By this time, you're probably approaching sunset.
Of like the fourth day, it feels like.
Maybe. If you want to do this in one day, you probably could, but it'll be very, very tight.
And I should say that the Tainan travel site does have some suggested itineraries if we want to put this into a specific list of see this in particular places.
Right. That's probably a good guide because they also tell you transportation options as well. So one particular one that's good for budget travelers is also this bus that has designated routes throughout Tainan. So it gives you like the most famous landmarks. Mm-hmm.
Well, they also have access to free walking tours, which we've certainly taken advantage of in many cities, and those can be wonderful. And also a pass that will allow you to get into different museums and things. And so I'll put a link to that.
Mm-hmm, for sure. So my next destination actually is hard to get by public transportation.
Okay.
I think the best way is to take a taxi. I mean, taxis are quite affordable in Tainan, so you should have no problem getting one. This is a salt field, and the name is spelled Jingzijiao, and it's pronounced Jingzijiao. The salt field is a great place to hang out, especially around sunsets, because it's super beautiful. The sun hits down on the water, and it's glistening and golden. And it's a sight to see.
Okay. And when you say salt field, we're looking at a place where they are harvesting salt through evaporation pans.
Yeah.
So it's all water, and therefore you get the reflection of the sun. Got it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you can also try making the salt yourself. They have tools there for you, like shovels and things. So you can try your hands at making salt. You can also buy souvenirs made out of salt from there.
When you say souvenirs made out of salt, you don't just mean a bag of salt. You mean salt carved into shapes?
I think you could actually buy bags of salt.
Sure, yeah.
You could also buy soap made out of salt and, tons of products.
Okay.
Salt related. Yeah, and nearby the salt fields is the Crystal Church. It's called Beimen Crystal Church, and this is spelled Beimen.
I suspect there are not multiple crystal churches in Tainan. Okay, yes.
That's correct. Yeah, this is also another great place to see the sunset, and it's also good for photo taking, especially if you're a couple looking to get pre-wedding shots.
Okay, so this is a very modern-looking building, mostly glass and arches. I don't know how else to describe it in an audio show, but hopefully there's pictures here.
It's actually modeled after this chapel in Guam, which explains its modern look. So it used to be just for photo taking, but now they seem to have more services available. So you can actually book for photo shoots. You can take a family train ride around the area. You can see art installations, and they have tons of activities happening now.
Okay. And this is out again away from the village near the salt pans.
Yeah.
Got it.
And then in terms of dinner, you could either try the night market. So the most famous one being the garden night market.
Okay.
So they have tons of food options, and I'm sure anyone would be good. And the part of the fun of the night market is to try something that you've never tried before or you've never seen before. So at this night market, I've seen things like fried crickets, among many other things. So you should definitely give that a try if that adventure is your thing.
If you have a favorite kind of food that I should get in Tainan that I could find at the night market, what would it be? Didn't sound like it was the crickets to me.
I actually didn't try that because I was a bit wary of it.
So if I am adventurous, I could try the crickets. You didn't say that you tried the crickets. I see.
Yeah. For me, I would try the coffin bread. This is a dessert that's famous and unique to Tainan.
You said coffin?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's called a coffin bread because it's actually just toast and the middle is carved out so you can have fillings inside.
Okay.
Right. So it looks like coffin, but it tastes delicious.
Okay.
That's for the night market, but you could also try beef soup. And this can be found throughout Tainan.
Okay.
So Tainan is very famous for beef soup because the beef here is slaughtered fresh. So it doesn't go through a frozen process. So it's very fresh, very tender. So they like to cook the beef, the raw beef, in the soup as you eat. So it kind of slowly turns pink as you drink the soup, which adds to the flavor. And it's really, really good.
Okay.
If you happen to be here during the winter and it gets a little chilly at night, you could also try the beef hot pot. And that's just a great way to warm up for the night.
Sounds good.
One thing I should mention is that because most of these places are very local and they don't have an English menu, so you really have to ask which part of the beef you are ordering. For me and my friend, we went to this beef pot place, and because we ran short on cash, so we ordered the cheapest thing on the menu, and it turned out to be beef testicles.
Okay. Rocky Mountain oysters.
I mean, it's a very chewy texture, very interesting. I wouldn't recommend just eating that, though. So definitely try different parts or regular beef slices.
Okay.
Oh, another very famous Tainan snack is the shrimp roll.
Mm-hmm.
And I recommend this particular place called Huang's. So Huang is the name of the place.
Okay.
And they're very famous for their shrimp rolls. In fact, there is this newspaper article clipping in their store where you'll find that it says people eat this and feel this feeling of euphoria or happiness when they eat it.
Sounds good.
They want to eat it fresh and hot, and you can dip it with a bit of mustard on side and eat it with the radish slices. And it's a perfect balance of savory and a bit of grease, but with some sort of light touches of the radish.
Okay.
Another place I recommend for food. I feel like I'm talking about food a lot, but really, if you're in Tainan, you're here for food. You want to try a place where they have something called the lard bibimbap.
Okay.
So I was joking about this with my boyfriend because there seems to be a Taiwanese take on everything. So there's the Taiwanese pancake, Taiwanese hamburger, and then now we have the bibimbap, which is a Korean invention.
Okay.
But what I mean by bibimbap here is that it's rice mixed with lard and egg. So you have a swirl of the lard on top of the rice, and you can add egg yolk on top and swirl everything and eat it together.
Okay. Lard is no, it's not my favorite sounding thing.
It doesn't sound appetizing, but actually it adds flavors to the rice and makes it a bit more moist, a bit more flavorful, and usually order other dishes alongside it. So you're not just eating the rice by itself.
Okay.
It's really symbolic of the olden times in Taiwan where people didn't have too much to eat or too many fancy things to eat.
Okay.
So this is sort of a very home-cooked style of dish.
Huh.
Another place that I think people will be interested in checking out would be a museum for the development of Taiwan. So the official name of the place is called the former Tate and Co. Merchant House.
Okay.
And this is a very colonial looking building that was built in the 1800s for trades in Tainan.
Okay.
It used to be for the British merchants. They were trading opium, tea, sugar, etc. until the Japanese took over, and then it became a salt company. And then now today it's a museum. So you can actually check out a place of early life in Taiwan in this museum.
Okay. That sounds fun.
So it's really interesting. And then right next to it, there is a tree house. It's called the Anping Tree House. And the tree house used to be the warehouse for the merchant house. And because now it's so run down, there's just tree roots grown all throughout the warehouse. It looks quite haunted, but actually also really cool. And it gives a really cool shading area in Tainan because it tends to be really hot.
Okay.
And I think that's it for history and culture in Tainan.
Okay.
In terms of other places to check out, I think definitely try some of the newer and more hipster cafes and bistros here too. The reason being, most of them are converted from old buildings because Tainan is such a historical place. A lot of the old buildings are converted now into really, really cool places. And so you really have to go there and check out the old furniture or the decorations in the stores.
Okay. Well, let's get to some of our wrap-up questions then. You're standing in the prettiest spot in Tainan. Where are you standing and what are you looking at?
For me, it would have to be the salt fields.
Okay. At sunset.
Yeah, at sunset. It's insanely beautiful.
Excellent. One thing that makes you laugh and say only in Tainan.
I think you would only find in Tainan sitting by the roadside eatery, eating on a low stool, and then there's traffic and scooters whizzing by and smell everything.
Excellent. Well, and I'm going to ask you in a minute here for your favorite post that we can send people to that you have done on Tainan. But I am going to say that we are going to definitely link to your Street Food Lovers Paradise guide to Tainan, where you can see pictures of lard bibimbap, for instance. But other than that, what other posts should we send people to that's going to help them get around Tainan?
I also have another post called a Tainan Travel Guide.
The expat's ultimate Tainan travel guide.
Right. So because of me, because of my experience living in Taipei, this is a good guide for you to get a sense of transportation options and where to stay and the logistics of getting around Tainan.
Excellent. And you have some recommendations there for solo and family backpackers, couples and solo backpackers. So that's great. And we'll send people off to that, and I'll link it in the show notes. Katy Liang from photospired.com. Thanks so much for coming on Amateur Traveler and sharing with us your love for Taiwan and more specifically for Tainan.
Thank you so much.
Again, I want to tell people that more information is coming soon about a way to support this show with Patreon and some advantages that will give you like an ad-free version of the show and early access to Amateur Traveler trips and those sorts of things. So stay tuned for that at the Facebook group, facebook.com/Amateur Traveler, or join the mailing list from the Amateur Traveler website. In other news of the community, I heard from Nani, who said, Chris, I'm addicted to the Amateur Traveler podcast. You have a great, insightful way of presenting the sites and places I dream about in the world. You have a good radio speaking voice with very interesting content. I started listening about 1 year ago, starting with the first episodes, and now I'm on episode 548. I especially enjoyed your take on vacations you went on, especially the Amateur Traveler trips. So I booked the Istanbul trip months ago. I've been to Western Europe and the Philippines, and Istanbul would be so different. And Nani writes that unfortunately she has to cancel, so there is room for one more person on that Istanbul trip. And then she says, also, since I just came back from a 3-week trip to Manila and the Visaya region, I'd like to answer your 4 questions as if I were honored to be interviewed on your show. Number 1, the prettiest spot I went to was driving around the mountain road in Legazpi and seeing a breathtaking view of the perfect Mayon volcano with a lenticular cloud cap, breathtaking.
What makes you laugh and say only in the Philippines? And I'm going to edit this just a little bit. When the pay toilet will charge you 5 pesos for number 1, but 10 pesos for number 2. You really know you're in the Philippines when a stray dog walks in the middle of an ongoing Catholic church service and nobody kicks the dog out, or even if it pees, because it's not a big deal and no one cares. People concentrate on the mass service. Number 4, what 3 words to summarize the Philippines? Tropical, resilient, and colorful. Excellent. And Nani, I hope you're going to be able to join us in 2021 or 22. With that, we're going to end this episode of Amateur Traveler. If you have any questions, send an email to host@amateurtraveler.com. We have interesting shows coming on Bulgaria, Yunnan, China, and the Oregon coast, so subscribe to the show if you're not already subscribed. And as always, thanks so much for listening.